Hello, welcome everybody to this episode of Freedom Hub's Working Group. I'm your host, Jeff Cantor, along with my co-host, Charles Froman. We are sponsored by the Freedom Hub and a variety of other interesting organizations, as you shall see. And we are, in fact, the disruptors intersection as we try to work towards a better place for all of us. Now, we are recording all these for posterity. So if you'd like to register to get notices when these events are going to occur, use that top link. Otherwise, you'll find us on any of your favorite platforms here, and we'll give you a little tour of those momentarily. And we also run a couple of other shows that we want to promote similarly, and I would encourage, if you could, to subscribe to any and all of these channels. Even if you love Brighteon, well, subscribe to us on all the channels, because it helps drive traffic and push viewership to see these really important topics. So we do appreciate that quite frequently. And then also, these are the same, this is actually the same website. This is our main site, but we've got kind of the acronym and then the full-blown version. But let's take a quick tour for a minute. But before we do have feature a LinkedIn group. There's a lot of interesting activity on here, so I would certainly encourage you to become a participant in that, if you would. Now, if you come to that website, as I indicated, you'll see there's an awful lot of great drop-downs and constantly adding information. However, if you come to the home tab and notice webinars down here, this is the place where these events are archived and are presented for new upcoming events. So here's for today as an example. We'll circle back to this when we're ready to bring our guest on. We do have another one in the evening that's going to be pretty pertinent. It's about vaccines. And then also we do a financial one, get you control of your dollars, a little listing of future guests, and then links to where all of these are recorded and archived. So with that thought in mind, we are up on, as an example, on BitChute, Brighteon, and relatively new in the world is Rumble. So we certainly encourage you to, like I said, to subscribe to all of those. Now, again, when you're on the main site, you'll notice it says also continuing the conversation. Well, guess what? This event is going to be exciting, as are all the others. But guess what? When it's over, it's not really done. You're going to want to maybe follow up with some of these people. So he'll be your chance to dig in with them afterward and help pursue activities with them, further their cause, and help them out. And then on a broader basis, we do have our issues in action under the Freedom Fighting for Freedom tab. And here what you'll see is a variety of actions that you need to capitalize on. Sadly, you can't just pick one or the other of these. You really need to click on all of these. And we keep rotating and bringing new stuff in as things pop up. And also reporting on all these separate organizations and continually adding lists that are working for your freedom. We've got articles and a host of various videos and stuff you'll find to be quite compelling. Now, on top of that, we are trying to get some other good stuff going on there out in the market space. So under our marketplace, we're featuring a very unique situation. So we do put a little plug in here periodically. And we have this special organization we've uncovered. And we've looked high and low and been approached by tons of organizations. And we only really picked one, because what we found was the most powerful efficacy-oriented program I've seen. And so we were able to work out a very special pricing with them at 15% off if you use your Freedom Hub discount. But even more important, in January, they're launching a series of the most cutting-edge kind of biotech products. And this is the one that if you've got any kind of something that might be from China that floated around or whatever, and who knows what, or you had H1N or SARS or this or that or whatever it might be. I can't really name names, but a couple of these in the morning and one in the afternoon, and the next thing you know, you're back to normal again. And the price is quite good, but what we worked out is if you go to the cart and you add affiliate, it drops the price at $19.97. So you just put affiliate sample in the shopping cart and you'll be blown away. I mean, I've been giving these away to people that say, boy, I'm getting sick, or I have this or that, and you pop those, and next thing you know, they're back to normal. So off that topic, but again, it's important, so we wanted to bring it to your attention. So now let's dig into the reason we're all here today, and let's find out what our guest Craig is up to. So Charles, if you'll do the honors.
Thanks, Jeff, and welcome, Craig. At Craig's LinkedIn, you'll see a very wide background in a lot of fields. He's done a lot of campaign work, all the way from the presidential level down to the lowest level, local level. He has done a documentary, produced one, basically around the fair tax called Unfair, Exposing the IRS. Some big clients of his in the past include the Christian Coalition and Americans for Prosperity. He is a veteran of the first Gulf War and has a finance background, having been a VP at banks, including Wells Fargo. And as a talk show host, he had a program called America's Wake Up Call. Today, however, we're going to talk about cyber currency and how important that is. It's been sort of a backwater for a few years, but now that we have the government's war on cash and the possibility with the COVID vaccine mandate, where if you don't comply, you may not be able to get a bank account, privacy and control over your money is becoming ever more important. And the blockchain mechanism Craig uses for his cyber currency is something increasingly folks are learning about, and it has application in another controversy regarding fraud in our elections. Half of Republican voters don't trust the election. And so any type of integrity that we can bring to elections should be a popular topic. So with that, Jeff, let's hear from Craig.
All right, very good. Craig, you are officially have the floor.
Well, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Jeff, for this invitation to be here with your group and to make this presentation. The first thing I'd like to do is just start off with expanding for about 2 minutes that biography so people know, why should we listen to this guy anyway? I have been the national political director on 3 presidential campaigns. I was the operations director and the college Republican chair on my very first campaign. So I've worked for Congressman Jack Kemp. I have worked for Ambassador Alan Keyes twice, and I have worked for Dr. Ron Paul. I'm one of the guys that talked him into running in 2007. So that's where I got my first taste of distributed networks, and then later what has become the blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and everything that goes along with that. And I did also work for Mr. Newt Gingrich. So I've been on the center right of politics in that, north quadrant of the Nolan chart, so to speak. I don't work for communists. I don't work for totalitarians. I don't work for people who want to steal our money, steal our wealth, steal our votes. And I have also been in the entertainment business. I've been a nationally syndicated radio talk show host, a documentary filmmaker. Both of those businesses and companies are still alive. So I am CEO wearing multiple hats. As I liken it, the joke I tell people is Steve Jobs made $7 billion personally as CEO of what famous company? Well, it's a trick question, of course. It's not Apple. He had to sell all of Apple before he got into it. It was Pixar. And a lot of people don't realize that the technical genius that gave us the mouse and the GUI and the cell phone and the iPad and all of these things also resurrected Disney and animation and those things from the virtual dead. So as we look at the 21st century now, the question I was asking off air was, where are the center-right technological leaders for this next generation? Why is it that when we look at what technology has across any front, we see what George Gilder called a communist model? And that communist model is basically a giant company controls everything, gives it away for free, and you are not their customer. You are the product. And we're seeing now people very tired of that, especially in this last election cycle. And that brings me into the point I'd like to start with in addressing. And that is voting. When we have an election we had 4 years ago, where basically everyone center-left said, it's Russian collusion, it's foreign governments, Trump is an illegitimate president, and we spent 4 entire years of the entire state apparatus investigating that, with 49% of the population convinced that we had had an unjust election. Now the shoe's on the other foot. And we're hearing fraud, we're hearing millions of packed votes, we're hearing computers controlled by national governments. And what we really have, if we take all the hyperbole away, if we take all of the emotion out of it, what we really have is the only republic on this world, and nobody trusts or believes the system is fair and honest. And such a system cannot endure. A republic cannot endure if it does not have the confidence in its electorate. This is how civil wars happen. And civil wars are not civil. We see it in our streets with the police brutality. We see it with the Antifa. We see it with, people burning their own cities to the ground. And I tremble when I think that this is a powder keg that must be addressed and confidence must be restored in this system, or I don't know where it goes from here. And I hope it doesn't go China, Russia, Venezuela, Nazi Germany. I mean, I don't care what side of the spectrum you're on. If you don't believe the system is fair, if you don't believe open and honest dialogue is taking place, and you think whatever side's in power is fixing the game, then we have a problem. Well, now that we've said that we have a problem, we are working on the solution. And I will tell you straight up, the solution to voting, and thus every other form of data. That includes your financial data, your medical records, your real estate, is the blockchain. Now, I'm going to assume that everyone watching this has some rudimentary knowledge of what the blockchain is. And since we're dealing with a very limited time scale, I'm not going to spend much time going in how that works. There's Wikipedia pages, YouTube's, knock yourself out. You can do it. But the one thing I will say about it, for the layman and just for everyone else, because it's the central tenet of all of it, whether you are talking about your healthcare records, your voting records, your financial records, your money, your wealth, your real estate, any of those things that your fine organization, your website has there, and those words underneath your banner. The blockchain is immutable. This is the history of data in 120 seconds. Data was originally written on stone tablets with figurines before we invented alphabets and phonics. And that's why we have the saying, this has been written in stone. And it's really hard to fake something written in stone. If you're the king and you chisel it in stone and you put it up on top of a big temple that everyone in your community can see, that's pretty much what the law is. And it's impossible to fudge that system. Well, later we went to animal skins and paper, and even those are hard to fudge. You can use whiteout, you can scratch them out, you can go burn books and print new ones, but somebody is going to find out if you're tampering with the message. When we invented data electronically, we actually used the old in-stone system for almost a generation. We had punch cards, which were really paper with holes in them, and we had magnetic tapes that archived the information. And someone would say, if you're in the old enough generation to remember this, oh yeah, pull the tapes. And you would reload the tapes or reload the punch cards, and that data was intact. And it was immutable. You couldn't fudge something on a magnetic tape because you didn't know if the data would be in the same space or size on the reel. Well, once we invented the hard drive and the floppy drive and the username and password, we started down data path that is a dead end. Technologically, socially, you cannot trust data that can be changed, period. And so the blockchain goes back to written in stone. It takes that fork and goes the other direction with it, away from mutable data to immutable data. And once you have that path, you have security, trust, confidence in everything. Nobody can inflate your money. Nobody can print your money. Nobody can change your records. You have it and you have control of it. And that's the other thing that's different. You know, what's old is new, what's new is old. Well, in the blockchain, what you have is the data is no longer controlled by a king on top of his temple or some private library belonging to some rich, wealthy person. Or in the case of our modern era that we're in, it no longer resides in some monolithic factory in Iowa. We have an Amazon, we have a Facebook, we have a Google, we have an Apple. All the big tech giants are here building large data centers full of servers, and they control the data. With the blockchain, it is completely decentralized, and you and I have this control over the data, and that is the future. That's the future because it's a capitalist future. It's a future because what we happen to have is the ability to then monetize the transactions all the way down the tree, from the root to the branches and back again. And this is the way the blockchain is completely secure. When it comes to voting, our system is going to use what's called a trimetric key. And that would be that we have basically 3 keys that are used on the system. The first key is a public key, exactly like everyone is familiar with in the technology, and it lets everyone see where the votes are. They can literally go down the block and say, this vote, this vote, this vote, this vote. And then we have the second key that tells the election official that Craig Bergman has voted and cannot vote a second time. Someone else has voted and cannot vote a second time. And then, of course, the master key belongs to you, the individual that ties those 2 data sets together so that you have the assurance that not only was your vote counted and recorded exactly the way you want it to, but that hasn't been changed or tampered with, or that the system is not in any way doing something with the data before it writes to the blockchain. So our system is a live blockchain, no translation layer, no proprietary layer, nothing hidden that happens before. When you press the vote, it's written to the blockchain. That's it. If you want to change your vote, you can change your vote. Now, some of these things, of course, would require legislative approval. But we have started from the basis. That's why I gave you my political background and my lobbying background. We have started with the basis that the system we're engineering is 100% legally compliant day one. We do not need to get a Congress, a president, a state senator, a governor, an election board, or anyone to approve a legislative change. We do not need a legislative fight. We do not need to lobby. We merely need to go in there and say, this is what you're paying these clowns now who are giving you all this bad press and bad PR and all this doubt. Here's our open source code. Here's our non-proprietary operation. It is straight to the blockchain. You press it. This is how it happens. And we are ready to go day one without any extra overhead, without any extra, nothing hidden behind the scenes. And so I just want to open this up. I've seen a lot of chats going across the bottom here. I assume there are some people with questions, and you could really go into the weeds with a lot of this stuff. And I didn't want to do that in a presentation. I wanted to be very succinct, very to the point, and then see where people's questions are and see what's happening in the real world. So Charles, I will turn it back over to you to moderate, and let's have a talk.
All right. Well, here's Jeff, and lo and behold, Charles has a question.
Thanks, Jeff and Craig. Great presentation. I believe Jonathan has been chatting up a bunch, and Jeff, we might invite him to kind of comment on Craig's talk and ask some questions. But before he does, though, before we discuss elections, Craig, a month ago when we first talked, you were talking about your Vortex blockchain cyber currency, I believe, or something to that effect. Am I remember?
You are. Let me go ahead and take a minute and address that. We have a 3-stage rollout that we're doing here. The first stage with voting, because it's a clear and present danger right now, has kind of moved to the forefront, and we will probably use one of a few dozen existing blockchains that are already out there and working as we work towards our own blockchain and our own token. When we do this, I have a item, and if I was thinking about that, I would have made a screen for it. But we basically have 7 criteria that what I call future coin needs to have, and that none of the existing coins have it, and none of the existing altcoins have it. We have this paradigm happening right now where you have people arguing, well, should it be more this or should it be more that? And you can go in these forums till your eyes bleed, and it's Ford, Chevy, Dodge argument level stuff. Now, it's serious, but I think one of the key requirements, and I'll just put this out for anyone looking at altcoins, investing in altcoins, looking at this kind of thing, and wave my hands as they disappear on the green screen and say, don't. None of them are the future coin, because they're failing all of them on the most important of my 7 rules. And that first rule is whatever comes out in the new technology has to be what I call a 0-day coin. And by 0-day, I mean it must be made available for everyone equally at the same time, the way Bitcoin was. You can't go, oh, well, we're going to give away 1 trillion of these coins and we pre-mine 600 billion. Nobody wants to make some jerk a multi-billionaire by buying his coin that he pre-mined all this, wealth out of thin air from. So whatever the future looks like for our currency that can handle the scalability of a world market that's valued at $100 trillion, that can handle the payments per second that eclipse Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and these other payment systems in the world combined, must be a 0-day coin. It must come out, and whoever does it has to basically give it away. That's the only way adoption will happen. We see some 1,500, maybe more, altcoins out there, and they're going nowhere.
Very good point there. Nice response. I was going to say, that's kind of up Jonathan's alley a little bit if you did want to throw 2 cents in there.
Yeah, I can't really read the chat while I'm sitting here on the
That's
screen.
fine. I'm just kind of
bring someone in and have them ask a verbal question. I'm thrilled.
Sure. Here he is.
Hey Craig.
How are you, sir?
Very well, thank you. That was a great presentation. So wait, I was confused. You said you were or were not issuing your own currency, and what was the purpose for that currency?
Okay, what we have is a V coin and a V token. We're going down both forks concurrently. The V coin will be a stable coin. We'll have an ICO. We'll do all this stuff, but that's probably a year to 18 months away because
I'm sorry, let me cut you off. What are we pegging it to? Are we pegging it in parity to the dollar? And what is the date? What is the date of the dollar that we're connecting it to? Is it, a March dollar, or is it a November dollar? Because as we know, that has changed significantly, right?
It has. So we are not pegging it to any world currency. We are pegging it at approximately the value of $2, because that is the labor cost of data acquisition. So we're pegging it to labor.
Cool. Okay. Interesting. And then which networks are you looking at as far as adoption? Obviously, you probably know that Ethereum is a bigger one.
Yes, we are looking at Ethereum. We're looking at other proof of stake families. We want to go down the proof of stake route. We just haven't seen one that we really think is secure enough for direct application, and we will make that determination probably sometime this summer.
Okay, so Am I correct in understanding that you're saying that you haven't yet determined whether or not the Ethereum consensus mechanism is secure or not? Is that what you just said? I'm just trying to understand.
I didn't say specifically on the consensus mechanism, but just, you know, as they transition to a proof of stake model, we want to look at it and not get ahead of ourselves.
Got it. Okay, cool. And then what licenses are we looking at? Are we doing kind of like the MIT? Or are we looking at more of, you know, kind of what Uniswap has done, where it's, you know, open source, except not commercial? I think it's a GP something like GPU3 or something.
Well, when we come out with our V token, the V token will be completely free and open source and white labelable, and anyone will be able to use it. It will have a restricted license that does not allow it to be modified without consensus, but we plan on giving it away.
Okay, cool. And I mean, that's great. I think you're 100%, you know, right. You know, this technology, it's so powerful. I think it should be given away. That's my business model. That's my approach. A protocol that I just created, I'm giving away 97.5% of it over the period of 10 years.
Yeah, when we do our ICO, will literally be zero. I will own none of it.
Nice. And then, so you're doing an ICO, and then, so why have you chosen to do kind of the ICO route? Why not partner with an exchange? The exchanges are actually the ones with all the money now. You know, ICOs, I mean, you know, that market kind of like dried up in 2013 from my understanding.
Well, Jonathan, you're a very smart guy, and I don't want to give away a secret, but I'll just tell you that we are going to use an exchange as well as the ICO model. We want to be the first publicly traded, SEC-sanctioned American ICO. And nice. We want to have our own exchange. And I won't go into much more detail beyond that because the other guy's got a few $1 billion head start on me, and I don't want to give him any smart ideas.
Man, those Wyoming guys are pretty smart. You know, I'll take it. I'll give it to them. So,
well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was a great question. I got a question back towards the elections, but let me ask you one that's sort of in that same vein. What would be the mechanics if we went with that election system as you described? How would I vote? What do I actually do now that I'm the voting consumer?
Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to have none of this garbage in, garbage out. So the only red flag caveat that is required of the election official to declare, and again, it doesn't take a vote, it's not partisan, but they simply have to say, we have a new system and everyone needs to re-register. We won't import data. We won't convert data. It will be a take your iPads around and sign up the people you want to vote. And every nonprofit, every political candidate, just like they do today, can take it to every high school, every nursing home, every armed services base, every business, and they can get people to re-register.
And when I go to vote, do I go somewhere, or would I vote on my phone, or what's going to be that side of it?
Every one of the election overseers, jurisdictions, if you will, has different requirements and different rules. Some have same-day registration, same-day voting. Some have absentee voting rules that our process would work on. Some allow digital voting already, some don't. So the ones that don't, let's talk about those because that's the standard. You would have to go to your polling place, and instead of seeing a Diebold machine or a Dominion machine or one of the other companies that's out there, you would see the Vortex machine and you'd press the screen the same way you do with anybody else.
Okay, I'm just curious if it sort of had a mechanical interface like we're accustomed to, so it's not too jarring for a good chunk of the population.
Yeah, no, it's if a 3-year-old can play a video game on their phone,
we're good. So a question that came in that vein is, and so how would you get these states, which are obviously the ones that are so problematic at the moment, which all of them appear to be Democrat run or controlled in some format, why would they want to allow this into those states?
Well, actually, the good news is that Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia all have Republican legislatures. And as I said, it doesn't require any statutory obligation. The will of the people is ultimately what's going to prevail. If there are people who want to fight it, then the people running against them will say, they want to steal your election. Right. Don't vote for them. And I believe in the American people.
Yep.
I believe in them in both parties, all 5, 6, 7 parties. And I think they want an honest debate over how this country should be governed, how they should be treated as individuals, and that they want it to be fair. And I'll just believe that.
Well, I think in some respects it's going to force that, because if they can't spend time or figure out some way to kind of jury rig the system, then you're obligated to try to talk and convince people for a change. So that's a winner right there. Charles has got his hand back up again. Unmute yourself.
Sorry about that, guys. You mentioned, Craig, with the blockchain, that one of the advantages for control of the records would be health records. Another improvement to health I've often thought would come from the fair tax that you have supported, just by abolishing the income tax, a deduction from which I think leads businesses to offer benefits, which can be problematic if you don't like the benefits or if you lose your job, the portability problem. Have you thought about that advantage of the fair tax, where having no income tax would allow for a more robust competitive market in healthcare?
Well, let me address that, because that is a great question, Chuck. The bottom line is this: if we go to an open source, transparent, decentralized currency, not a Fed coin that's tracking everything you're doing, or something out of Red China with their social scores, or some draconian Blade Runner type thing. But if we get the monetary system we deserve as a free people, and we demand it, then the fair tax is the only form of taxation possible, because it will be impossible to prove how much money you have and what it's worth. The only way the government can collect it is at the cash register, when you buy a cheeseburger, when you buy a new shirt, when you get an Apple Watch. And so I think that the fair tax is inevitable. Now, for folks who don't really fully understand that, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead and do some research, but I'm just going to mention a couple economic points on it. Number one, the fair tax is revenue neutral. So we're not fighting the who gets taxed or the how much people get taxed fight. It pays for all the welfare, all the military, no matter what side of the budget you're on. It's revenue neutral. That fight takes place somewhere else down the road. It's not a how much fight, it's a how fight. And it no longer requires you to fill out forms. It no longer requires you to keep paperwork. It no longer requires you to have an accountant or anything. You literally pay tax only when you buy, sell, or trade at the retail level, period. Nothing else is taxed.
It's an excellent point in that, conversely, having no tax would be great, obviously, but if we're going to have some, that's the cleanest way to do it by far.
It's the lesser of the evils that Ben Franklin said we'd have to have.
So here's the other side of that, though, then. How does that new world you're describing change our serfdoms on our little plantations that we think we own, but we don't? Because if we fail to pay the property tax, the city comes and takes your home, so I guess you didn't own it in the first place anyway. So will it change any of that?
I'd love to take a swing at that. It's my favorite one. The fair tax, H.R. 25, currently sitting in the United States Congress, takes a pass on property tax. As a fair tax, Ron Paul, libertarian, Republican, conservative, that wing of the party guy, I absolutely 100% agree with you that the fair tax needs to be imposed at the time that the property is transferred in a retail transaction. And once the landowner, property owner, has paid that assessment over the life of their mortgage, or because they've paid it off or bought it in cash, it's a zero tax from that point on, and it is not taxed again until it is sold and that includes no tax for inheritance. You want to pass the family farm or the homestead on for 100 generations into some people that are, you know, coming from other planets. We don't care. The tax is only at the time of sale. So you would be correct. We have to get rid of this land tax serfdom thing that's crept in along with the income tax and all this communist manifesto 19th century garbage.
That's great news on that front. Now we'll see if we can get them to stop trying to tax your car every time you get it sold, a used car. I don't know how many times you can sales tax a car over the life of the darn thing.
The fair tax is a new retail tax. It does not tax used. So you buy your car, you pay the tax. You sell it to your son, nothing. He sells it to his friend, nothing. He sells it to a junkyard or a dealer, he'll pay a new tax on his new car, but the trade-in is full book value.
Oh, that's fantastic. Can't wait to get in that Wayback Machine and get out of 2020. Where are we going to go? Mark, I see your hand up.
Yes, I was going to ask a question for Craig about the voting machine. Do you know which states have shown interest in this already and how far along you are with the sales proposals to other states and or local municipalities?
Well, thank you, Mark. That's a great question. I don't want to get too specific in calling people out, but I have worked in a dozen states across the United States for candidates. I have lived in multiple states, and where these folks exist, I have been reaching out to them for many months, and I can tell you there is one of the top 10 areas in this country that by voting, that is one of the problem areas that we're talking about. So it's a major metropolitan area. And they have already said that for 2022, they are not going to renew their existing machine, and they are coming out with an RFP looking for a new solution. And they winked while we were sitting in the back of the room.
Well, that's good, and all it's going to take is to be in one state, and suddenly everybody will realize the value, and it's going to be hard-pressed to not put it every other state after that.
And we will make that a very hot political potato for the midterm elections, believe me.
Oh, it'll be easy to do that based on this tee-up we are in the middle of, for sure. That's a great point. Any other questions that we've got here for Craig?
I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Charlie here. Craig, a couple questions. One, can you give any more detail about the current fraud allegations? I know there's a lot of them going out there, and understandably, some folks are reticent to repeat them without knowing too much about them. And you would hope that the proper officials would do their vetting. And I guess there's some complaints among the base that some of our officials aren't pushing too hard on the allegations, while others like Sidney Powell are regarding the glitch or Dominion, systemic failure, et cetera. Do you have any comment on that? And then have a follow-up.
Yes. Let me first start off by saying that someone gave me the moniker, the conspiracy therapist, a few years ago. And so I debunk all conspiracy theories. I do not buy them. I do not believe them. I believe in Occam's razor, that the simplest answer is usually what the simplest answer is. Now, we know, statistically speaking, that when we went to bed at 3 a.m., Trump was leading by about 1.7 million votes in these particular states that are in question. And when we got up in the morning, that lead had completely evaporated, and that hundreds of thousands of votes were cast for Joe Biden only. We know this to be absolutely certain, absolutely true, because the Republicans are currently about 2 seats away from winning the majority. And if you put fraud into a couple of these other elections, you saw a red wave happening with governors, senators, congressmen all across the country. Another statistical anomaly is that in every single city and town in this country, 50,000 cities and towns, Joe Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton, except in 7. In 7 cities, Joe Biden outperformed Barack Obama's historic 2008 win. Now, I don't know what kind of fraud there is. I don't know what their systems are. I can only tell you their systems are closed and proprietary, and without a federal judge saying, I want your servers, I want your source code, without a federal prosecutor saying, coder Snuffy on the witness stand, did you write this code? Do you recognize? I mean, without a prosecutorial indictment and without a fair and honest trial where both sides can ask questions, I don't know that we'll ever see the answer to this. And so it must be litigated by due process in a court of law. And I have great hope, based just on my understanding of statistics and these anomalies, that not all of these votes that were counted are deserving to be counted.
One thing in that regard with those votes, it looks like he actually lost votes, they were showing in some instances. And how does a candidate ever lose a vote in an election? The other guy suddenly comes from behind, but how do you suddenly lose 10,000 votes or whatever?
Well, they call it a clerical error. Oops.
It's amazing how much.
You got to believe what you want to believe with that. I don't.
Better than the magic show in Vegas. Sharon, I got your hand up there, I see.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I worked with Craig in a political campaign 17 years ago. It was a pleasure, and I've been following him ever
Sharon,
since.
Hi.
Yes, in New Jersey. Hi. Hi, yes, and I've really enjoyed your insight. For 17 years, I've been following you. This is a very wise man. Now, I'm just trying to figure out how we're going to get past the mainstream media's blockade by ignoring or slandering stories like this, information like this. As we saw, you saw all they did this election to ignore uncomfortable information.
Yeah, here's the bottom line on both of your questions, because it's combined. A federal judge in one of these jurisdictions must look at the evidence that Powell and Giuliani are presenting and say, I believe this is substantial. I will hear this case. The minute he does that, Katie, bar the door, there will be witnesses and a trial, and he will render a ruling, and that can be appealed to the Supreme Court. So if no judge says, looking at this, I want to touch this hot potato, nothing will happen. The Supreme Court does not have original jurisdiction. It must happen in a local federal district, and it must go through the appeal process to have any hope. So if you are a praying person, pray that one judge will say, I want to take a look at this. That's all it takes.
Do we have time? Do we have enough time?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Al Gore was declared president for 38 days. We got plenty of time. The Electoral College doesn't even meet till the 14th of December. And if they don't have enough votes because there are 5 or 6 states in question, then it doesn't even go to the House of Representatives until the 20th of January. We have plenty of time.
Charles?
Thank you.
Following up on Sharon's concern, do you have any idea, Craig, any inkling whether a federal judge will let a trial go through? It seems to me a lot of the base is a little dejected at this point, not too confident that there'll be justice here.
Boy, you want to end this on a downer, don't you? Look, I'm not psychic. I can't make a prediction if someone will or won't, but I can tell you absolutely, if a judge does, that is because he has seen the evidence and believes it is worth putting his career and maybe his life on the line for it, and that it will be substantially upheld. If nobody does, then there's either not enough evidence or we're down a very, if I may borrow a Joe Biden phrase, long, dark winter path.
Again, the uptick, though, is that there'll be a drive to get to a better election system for the midterms. So
that's what I'm going to be working on for the next 2 years, is making this reality happen.
Yep. There's all, again, one place to do it is all it's going to take to validate what you're up to. Kishore, I see your hand.
Yeah. So today in the newspaper, there's an item which says that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case involving about 8,000 votes, which is not going to change the election, but still the judge has agreed to hear it. So can that then snowball into something bigger in the Supreme Court?
It's possible, but really they have to go look at that 300,000 vote. They have to go look at the vote swaps. They have to go look at the clerical corrections. When you are in a court of law, you have what's called scope and standing. And you can't bring up things that are not germane to the case that you brought the filing for. So the 8,001 is fairly obvious, but that's a ceremonial win. We're talking about the hundreds of thousands of votes. We're talking about a number. There's probably 12 potential lawsuits, and they'll all be filed individually. And a judge must decide to take a look at one or more of them, and then they can combine them together. But the 8,001 is when the media says it's not going to make a difference, they're correct.
All right. Charles, I think I see your hand there.
Jeff, is that me?
Yes. Did you
sorry. Bringing it back home, Craig, you started with the, leftist nature of big tech. Can you kind of reframe how your venture is going to address that, I would think, an existential problem, control of our data, suppressing expression, which of course is the first step towards, totalitarian takeover. You shut up the dissidents. So kind of give us hope with that dynamic.
All right, so you're going to bat it out at me there and let me do the promo pitch and end on a good note. Thank you very much. I would just say that we have a full 64-page white paper that we published this Monday on our website, vortexblockchain.com. There's a little shiny red button at the top. Click it, download it, share it with your friends, family. And, I always tell people this. Maybe I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Maybe I'm not the second coming of Steve Jobs. But there was a little Iowa technology company called Gateway Computer, and all they did was make computers, and they got bought out by Acer for $14 billion. So I would be happy to save this voting system and make $14 billion and call that a good life.
Very good. Well, let's close on actually a kind of part of the topic when you were into the cryptocurrencies and the like. Let's talk about the final skirmish, because you've had dealings with Ron Paul, obviously, and the Fed and the like. And, the cryptocurrency is kind of the end around. If it's built the way you described and plenty of people won't want to participate, suddenly the need for the Fed and that paper money sort of dissipates. Well, they're not going to just stand around and let that occur. How does that transition effectively take place, where we just they wake up one day and no one's sitting in the pews, or is there going to actually be some
exactly how it goes? Let me hit that for you. There was a company founded in the 1800s, the turn of 2 centuries ago, and they discovered that they could just take pictures, not even photography pictures, but hand-drawn pencil sketches of clothing, supplies, tools, even houses. And they could print them and bind them in a booklet. And that people would buy them from this booklet based on nothing but their own pitch and a sketch done with a pencil, send money to them that would have to be couried across the country to get to their office. And then the item they ordered, because there was no online, would have to be shipped on another covered wagon to reach them. The process took months. This company built a gigantic building in Chicago, and they are known as Sears, Roebuck and Company. They pioneered and for a century dominated order something sight unseen. They had warehouses and shipping and a website, and they did not see Amazon.com coming. They didn't see it, and when they saw it, they scoffed at it. And when Amazon said, we're going to replace you, they said, you have no warehouses, you have no stores, you have no distribution. And Sears is going away, and Amazon is a $2 trillion company. Montgomery Ward's is gone. Best Buy is closing. Radio Shack is gone. On the tech front, AOL bought Time Warner and is now a worthless penny stock owned by Time Warner, who basically ended up buying it back from themselves in the corporate structure. MySpace is gone. And what you have is these tech giants of Apple and Amazon and Google and Facebook. In 5 years, they will be the 8-track cassette tapes of social media and Web 2.0. It was a wild run. We've had a great 10 plus years with them. They're gone. And I'm going to make a plug now for my favorite book. It's not my book, but as Steve Jobs once plugged George Gilder's Life After Television, saying, this is what's coming, we're going to build it. I'm going to plug his Life After Google and say, what I wrote 2 years before George Gilder wrote his book. If you haven't read Life After Google, you need to. That answers in great detail everything that's coming. And these tech giants are as gone as every other giant before them was gone.
Yep, they serve their purpose, just like most of those things. It runs its course. And we're going to squeeze in one last question here. So, Jonathan, I'm going to let you do the honors.
Hey, Craig. I love the analogy with Sears. That was really great. It is too bad that they didn't see the turning of the tide. Sometimes that is the way, with the evolution into these new systems. Something that I wanted to ask you was on social media. So you talked about Web 2.0. Well, what is your vision for how social media will evolve? And, what does that look like? And, who are some of the big players right now?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I addressed that somewhat in my white paper that's on our website. And I don't want to give away the store. So even when you go to the white paper, it's really thin theory and not a lot of meat to it. But I can just tell you right now that the blockchain technology is going to change everything. And here's the bottom line, and I said it 35 minutes ago when I was on here. When content can be monetized up and down, that changes the paradigm entirely and completely. And every data center these companies built will be as empty as a downtown department store mall.
Slip in a last comment because we're going to zip the time.
Yeah, of course. I've been in this space since 2013. So, I don't necessarily see the data centers going away. I just see more of them. But I see it looking kind of like AT&T and the regulatory stuff that happened in the early turn of the century, where the progressive regulations essentially handicapped those large industries and made it so they never really competed ever again. So I see the Googles and Amazons taking more that, kind of fate, where they get regulated and become part of the American infrastructure, because that is what's happening with computer hardware. They're becoming the rails that information travels through, the globe and inner space.
Yeah, that's going to change also. I highly recommend George Gilder's book. I can tell you haven't read it if you're still in that paradigm. No offense, my friend, but I can almost assuredly tell you there will be no data centers at all 10 years from now.
Interesting way to close it out here today. That's a nice commentary. That was a very good conclusion, and also just wanted to switch the screen for 1 minute because in relation to what you just discussed, one of our guests today also has a show, and this is the interview that they did. So you're going to want to come over here to the Solar Enterprise and take a look-see. You'll enjoy it as all of us will too, because I've not particularly seen this one, and I know Ed does a nice job. So again, I want to thank you so much for being here today. and definitely encourage everyone to participate, as I said, and subscribe and come again, and definitely circulate these videos. We definitely need, and the more they get viewed, then they start trending on these platforms and the like. So we really want to kind of drive this info out there. So Craig, thanks so much for today.
You're quite welcome. It's been my pleasure.